Oh, sorry, the question is that the House has considered the EU-UK summit. Richard Tice.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Well, this will go down as a week in parliamentary history as the week of the greatest surrender, bookended by today our valuable freehold is being surrendered. The Chagos Islands, where there'll be a statement later, and the beginning of the week, our valuable freedoms won from the European Union through the joys of Brexit is being surrendered. And I think many members of the British public will be confused because last week the government was talking about the joys of the freedoms of Brexit to be able to do trade deals with India, trade deals with the United States. And all of a sudden this week it has gone back to the fog of surrender by handcuffing ourselves very close to the European Union. Now there's a rule in business which has been deployed many times by parliamentarians that nothing is agreed till everything is agreed. And normally with the EU there's always a last-minute drama. But this time was different because what happened was little was agreed and everything was conceded. Yeah, that's it. That's the bottom line, Madam Chair. Little has actually been agreed and everything has been conceded in an extraordinary act of surrender where basically it's that, to use another expression, it's the thin end of the wedge. And the EU can't believe their luck in that they've opened the door, they've stuck the little wedge in there, and they've now got lots of things that they are still negotiating on. And every time they're going to say, well, you've got to agree this before we move on to the next one. We've heard it all before, and yet this government has learnt nothing. So we know that the first surrender is very dear to my own constituents in Boston, my fishermen, who are absolutely raging furious because they assumed that after the end of this first phase deal, then more quotas would be negotiated back to the UK, they would be beneficiaries, and that we would be taking back more control of our waters. Instead, it's all been conceded for 12 years. It's gone. I'm most grateful to the Honourable Lady for intervening.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for giving way. Aren't his fishermen pleased that the market that they were trying to export fish to, which was often turning that fish back because of the massively complicated controls, they have now got open to them again? We were not eating that fish in the UK and it was rotting too often.
I'm most grateful to the Honourable Lady, to which I say no. They haven't mentioned that at all, and nor have any of the major logistics firms in my constituency mentioned once about the delays, the so-called delays at the border. This surrender of fishing is completely and utterly inexcusable, and nothing has been gained in return. And then, of course, the second big surrender is that apparently we've negotiated theoretical access to some future EU defence fund, but we don't know how much access. All we know is that we're going to have to pay a whole load of cash, but we don't know how much cash. It's all got to be negotiated in the future. So little's been agreed and everything has been conceded. The Honourable Lady is most busy.
On the defence industry, we have some of the best defence industries in the world in the UK. I am disappointed that, I think we're fellow patriots of this country, that he wants to downplay our ability to actually access this money and to support UK businesses and jobs.
What I said was, if you're going to agree a deal, agree the terms of the deal. Don't just say that you're going to you'd like to have a bit of the action, and please tell me how much it's going to cost me later, and I've no idea how much of the action I will get. That's a terrible deal. And we all know that no deal, Madam Chair, is better than a bad deal. But don't worry, let's move on to Surrender 3, shall we? Surrender 3 is, of course, the issue of becoming a rule taker. So the Honourable Member for Walthamstow referred to the agri-foods, the SPS deal, and that all sounds very good until you realise that actually, well, so now we've got to take a whole load of extra rules that we have no input in whatsoever from Brussels under a process called dynamic alignment that quite possibly would mean we couldn't do any further trade deal with a great nation like the United States, instead of arguing for mutual recognition, which of course can exist between nations who have excellent standards of food and products, which we have, of course. So 3 great surrenders, and it seems to me that we have gained nothing there. Indeed, we'll probably have to pay more if we want any more rules to be given to us. Why would we do that? Why would we pay more when we've given ourselves the freedom to not have to pay any more? We thought we'd done all of that. But then again, if we're not content with that, what about surrender 4? This is the big one. And I think the Minister himself earlier this year said, don't worry, chaps. No plans for any form of youth mobility scheme. Well, it turned out the Minister was right, because some clever person rebadged it. I've got an idea. Let's call it a youth experience scheme. Well, I'm sure it's a lovely experience. But when you're 30 years old, are you still a youth? Or is it a middle-aged experience scheme? And during the negotiation, I could see what will happen, because this hasn't been concluded. This will become an old age experience scheme. And then what will happen is that someone will say, but hang on, if it's an old age experience scheme, we haven't got the workers in the care homes to look after the old age people from the EU who've come over to our glorious care homes. So then we'll have to have more freedom of movement and dependence, because this is still open-ended. We don't know the age of the youth experience scheme. We don't know the duration of the youth experience scheme. We have no idea about the number of youth experience. I'm hoping I will still qualify for this scheme at the age of 60. Of course I will give way to the...
I, like him, share a burning desire to still be considered young and, alas, have to face the brutal reality. But I just wonder if he has such similar concerns about the 13 other youth mobility schemes that we have with countries around the world. Does he fear the Australians, the New Zealanders, the Canadians, the Japanese, the Uruguayans who come on a youth mobility scheme in the same way that he does Europeans? Or is it that he thinks they're younger and fitter than him?
Well, they may well be younger and fitter than my good self, and I'm most grateful. But the truth is, actually, proximity is a big difference. But the concerns of my constituents in Boston, which has received a very significant quantity of net immigration from East European, they haven't seen any Australians in Boston and the likes. And I think there is a proximity issue there. But surely it must be right, if you're going to agree a deal, then agree the terms of the deal. But we don't know the numbers, we don't know the cap, we know absolutely nothing, we don't really know the duration of this. And so we're completely and utterly at the mercy of the European Union. And I have to say, to anybody in this place, spend a day with me in sunny Skegness. Knock on 1,000 doors with me, and I promise you, not a single door. The first thing they will say to you is, I want a youth experience scheme for Johnny or Judy. Not a single one of them will say that. Of course, I'll be delighted to give way to my honourable friend.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and I thank the Chair for announcing me. With anything, the terms of when the terms are unclear, of course, the big risk is the unintended consequences. With over 60 million people in the EU under 30, would my honourable friend agree with me that the unintended consequences here, given that this scheme does nothing for the immigration issues we're already facing, could be quite severe?
Well, this is the point of the honourable member is bang on, because under 30 you've got some tens of millions. Is it 60 million? Is it 70 million? Who knows? But it is a sizable number. And we know that we have huge pressure on our housing. We have a determination to increase wages for British citizens. We've got pressure on our healthcare. So actually, the British people have clearly expressed just a couple of weeks ago in some elections, when they backed Reform UK's net immigration policy of net zero, they said, actually, we quite like that, which is why, of course, we did so well. So I think that there may be a sort of a loss of the ability to listen to the concerns of the British people. I'd be most delighted to give way to my neighbouring MP.
Well, indeed, and I can confirm I've never been an Australian or a Canadian in Boston or in Spalding, actually. But leaving that to one side, isn't the real challenge of this, the real threat of this, even more sinister than the honourable gentleman suggests? Because we have, stubbornly, a huge number of young people not in education, employment, training. In fact, the trend is slightly up. It is a tragedy that those people are trapped without either jobs or learning to get jobs. They will inevitably be competing with people from abroad for those early opportunities to work. Young